I'm joined today by James Pearson, president of the William E. Simon Foundation and author of the new book, Shattered Consensus: The Rise and Decline of America's Post-War Political Order. The book is so interesting because at the macro level, I agree with so much of what you're saying, but maybe not surprisingly, as a progressive, at the micro level, I disagree with a lot of the explanations you give and solutions you suggest to the problem that we're facing. So let's start at the beginning. Describe what you picture as the coming challenge to the United States of America.
Okay, thank you, David. Appreciate inviting me to be on. Well, first of all, this book is a collection of my recent essays, including several essays that address the political economic challenge facing especially the United States, but some other Western countries as well. I include a long essay called America's Fourth Revolution, in which I lay out this general historical view that we have had in the United States three distinctive systems of political economy under the Constitution. The Jeffersonian political economy, sort of organized around slavery and cotton exports that disintegrated in the Civil War. The Republican industrial small government system from the Civil War that evaporated in the Great Depression. And then thirdly, the post-war democratic welfare Keynesian system that was created in the 30s and 40s and which is now roughly 70 years old. And my thought is that this system is evaporating, much like the Jeffersonian and Republican industrial systems evaporated before them after roughly a lifetime of being in existence.
So this is fast. Let's pause there for a second. This is fascinating because on our program, we've talked about this sort of progression of economies through an agriculture and farming-based economy, which is similar to what you're talking about in terms of the cotton-based in slavery status quo of 1800, into a sort of industrial revolution and manufacturing economy, which is also, again, what you talked about. And then as the into more of a service industry type based economy, which we now are concerned is evaporating because of automation and the elimination, flat out elimination of so many both manufacturing and service jobs. So there's a lot of overlap in the sort of hypothesis that I've outlined and the one that you've outlined, but yet we come from very different perspectives in terms of what caused this, right?
Well, let me just qualify. I think what you just said is a valid historical interpretation of what's happened, but I emphasize the political element.
Okay.
Which is to say that these transitions have occurred partly heavily through political interventions.
Right.
And that these systems of political economy were carried forward and implemented by one particular political party, which organized the coalitions to support them. In the pre-Civil War period, it was the Democratic Party of Jefferson and Jackson. In the post-Civil War period, it was the Republican Party of Lincoln, McKinley, and the presidents of the 20s. In the post-war period, it was the Democratic Party of FDR, Kennedy, and Johnson heavily. We won't get into the Reagan Revolution, which I think is important, but my idea is that these things don't happen naturally as a consequence of evolution in the economy. There are political interventions, which are important, and I think that's the case now. Why do I think the current system is unwinding, the Keynesian welfare state system? Why is it unwinding? Well, I point to several things. One, demographics. We have a baby boom generation retiring and drawing Social Security, which will put burdens on the government. We already have a heavy debt, not only governmental debt, but private sector debt. And we have a slow-growing economy. Ever since the bust of 2000, we've been growing at about a 2% rate. I don't think that gets the job done for the United States. And we have increasing political polarization. The parties cannot convene and agree on any solution to any of these problems, either to stimulate growth or solve the entitlement problem or anything, which means that all these crises will escalate to a point where we can't avoid them any longer, and that will require a kind of a political transition.
So let me jump in here because you've sort of said a lot there. I completely agree with you that we seem to be approaching the sort of precipitous beginning of an unwinding of our economic status quo, and I would agree as the result of the political system. Except when I think about it, I think not of the sort of factors that you talked about, at least not primarily. I think about, for example, the incredible wealth and income inequality that we have. And you actually reference something you describe as the inequality hoax. So let's explore that. What is the inequality hoax in your mind?
Well, the title of that chapter in my book is The Inequality Crisis, in quotes. I wrote a short pamphlet called The Inequality Hoax.
Right.
I think that's too strong. The inequality problem is real.
Okay.
There's no question about that.
That's good. Good that we can agree on that.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And I referenced that in my essay. The question is, what's caused it? Why is it happening? And what do we do about it? And I argue in my book that really the reason this has happened is an unprecedented boom in the financial markets that began in the early 1980s. Bonds and stocks for the past 35 years have delivered incredible returns. It's unprecedented in human history. In 1980, the valuation of world stock markets was less than $2 trillion. It's well in excess of $60 trillion today. It's gigantic. Who owns financial assets, stocks and bonds? Well, the wealthy do, primarily. Of course, they're owned by pension funds and endowments as well. But in terms of individuals, it's the wealthy. The top 1% probably owns 50% of the stocks and bonds out there. A little bit less than that, closer to 40%.
Absolutely.
That's the real cause of the wealth and income inequality. Anyone close to the financial markets has done well.
Well, but that's part of it, though, James. Right?
If you throw in the global economy, I think the global economy is partly responsible for the surge in stock and bond valuations. That's one of the factors, because our companies get their profits internationally much more than they did 40 or 50 years ago.
But James, let me pause for a second, though. Let me pause for a second. Let me pause for a second, because I don't want to get too far off track without having a chance to sort of dig in a little deeper. There's no question that the heavy concentration of stock and bond ownership among the rich has further concentrated net worth among the rich. Absolutely agree with you. You're spot on with the numbers, no question about it. But we can't ignore that even removing retirement contributions, just focusing on base compensation, we have seen a drastic separation in terms of base compensation from the highest and lowest paid individuals within companies, and that's a huge factor as well.
Yeah, I think that's a significant factor. It's not the dominating factor, but it is a significant factor. Thomas Piketty in his book has an interesting explanation of that. My view of that would be that a lot of those salaries, though, are linked to stock market valuations. You know, in the Clinton years, the federal government limited the amount of tax deductible compensation that could be paid to executives, and instead they went in the direction of paying executives via stock options.
Sure.
The explosion of stock options obviously exploded the compensation of these executives. In other words, the Clinton administration tried to close one door and they opened up a huge door on the other side. So, and I think that's also true of executives, say, in not-for-profit industries or in universities. Private universities with gigantic endowments are paying their presidents very large sums of money. So what you say is correct up to a point. But, you know, I think still the dominating factor is the explosion in the financial asset markets. Now, I believe we're going to cure the problem.
I want to talk about how that might happen, because
it's very simple. It's happening today.
Oh, tell us how.
The stock market will crash.
And that will resolve this issue in what way?
That will evaporate a great deal of the income inequality that we see.
Yeah, but long term, I mean, but hold on, James, hold on. If you generally have a positive outlook on the future of the United States, it's hard to imagine a future that doesn't include the continued valuation of American stocks. We've seen corrections like the one we've seen over the last week many times before. They typically happen yearly, in fact. But if you believe that the country will exist, the stock market is going to rebound. I don't know that that's the solution.
Well, let me step back. I meant that sarcastically or ironically.
Okay.
That is to say, we can solve the inequality problem very simply by crashing the stock market. Nobody wants that to happen. All right. So, what is the cure for the inequality problem if that is taken off the table? And I agree with you. Nobody wants to see that happen. We do have corrections. We're probably in the middle of one now. The only thing I would say about that is that, you know, we do have a slow growing economy. The Federal Reserve, the monetary authorities have spent a lot of ammunition that they have in keeping the markets up. When they go down, I don't know that I'm not sure they're going to be able to levitate them back up very quickly. We'll see about that. That's somewhere out in the future. But I would say, and I've argued, that inequality, income and wealth inequality, is built into the regime of political economy that we've built in the West since 1980s.
There is no question about that. I could not agree with you more. And we have so much more to discuss, and unfortunately today we're out of time. We will absolutely have James Pearson back. He's president of the William E. Simon Foundation. The new book is called Shattered Consensus: The Rise and Decline of America's Post-War Political Order. Thank you so much for talking to us today.
David, thanks for having me on. I'd be happy to come on again. Appreciate it.